Sri Ramakrishna, my master. Over the course of time, the descendants of the Aryans deviated from proper conduct. They lost their spirit of renunciation and their sharp intelligence and became deeply attached to popular customs. They even failed to understand the import of the Puranas, thinking them contradictory to one another because each one taught by emphasizing only a particular aspect of the spiritual ideal, and because each taught people of ordinary intelligence the abstruse truths of Vedanta by using concrete imagery and elaborate language. They divided the whole of the Sanatana Dharma, the sum total of all religious ideals, into many sects. They enkindled the fire of sectarian jealousy and anger and tried to throw each other into it. When the degraded Aryans had almost turned India, the land of religion, into a hell, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna incarnated himself to demonstrate the true religion of the Aryan race. He made visible the unity among the innumerable sects and denominations of the Hindu religion that had cropped up throughout the country over a vast period of time. At that time, the Hindu religion had been devastated by continuous sectarian fights and was seemingly divided into many sects. Its various sects were overrun by hideous customs, and Hinduism had become confusing to Indians and an object of contempt to foreigners. Over time, this eternal religion had been debased, but Sri Ramakrishna incorporated its universal and eternal aspects in his own life to become a living example of the eternal religion which he lived before all for the good of humanity. Before the effulgence of this new awakening, the glory of all past revivals of Aryan society will pale like stars before the rising sun. So, at the dawn of this momentous epoch, the message of the harmony of religions has been proclaimed. This boundless and all-embracing idea, which has been hidden in the Vedic scriptures and religion, has been rediscovered and declared to humanity with a clarion call. This new religion of the age will benefit the whole world, but most especially India. Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, the founder of this new religion, is the reconstructed manifestation of the earlier founders of religions. O human beings, have faith in this and realize it. Every new religious wave requires a new center. The old religion can only be revivified by a new center. Hang your dogmas or doctrines, they never pay. It is a character, a life, a center, a God-man that must lead the way. That must be the center round which all other elements will gather themselves and then fall like a tidal wave upon the society, carrying all before it, washing away all impurities. Again, a piece of wood can only easily be cut along the grain. So the old Hinduism can only be reformed through Hinduism and not through the newfangled reform movements. At the same time, the reformers must be able to unite in themselves the culture of both the East and the West. Now, do you not think that you have already seen the nucleus of such a great movement? That you have heard the low rumblings of the coming tidal wave? That center, that God-man to lead, was born in India. He was the great Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Shankara had a great head, Ramanuja a large heart, and the time was ripe for one to be born, the embodiment of both this head and heart. The time was ripe for one to be born who, in one body, would have the brilliant intellect of Shankara and the wonderfully expansive, infinite heart of Chaitanya. One who would see in every sect the same spirit working, the same God. One who would see God in every being. One whose heart would weep for the poor, for the weak, for the outcast, for the downtrodden, for everyone in this world, inside India or outside India, and at the same time, whose grand, brilliant intellect would conceive of such noble thoughts as would harmonize all conflicting sects, not only in India, but outside of India, and bring a marvelous harmony, the universal religion of head and heart, into existence. Such a man was born, and I had the good fortune to sit at his feet for years. It was while reforms of various kinds were being inaugurated in India that a child was born of poor Brahmin parents on the 18th of February, 1836, in one of the remote villages of Bengal. The father and mother were very orthodox people. Very poor they were, and yet, many a time, the mother would starve herself a whole day to help a poor man. Of them this child was born, and he was a peculiar child from very boyhood. He remembered his past from his birth, and was conscious for what purpose he came into the world, and every power was devoted to the fulfillment of that purpose. While he was quite young, his father died, and the boy was sent to school. Seeing the Pandits arguing at a gathering, he gathered this moral out of it. This is the outcome of all their knowledge. Why are they fighting so hard? It is simply for money. The man who can show the highest learning here will get the best pair of clothes, and that is all these people are struggling for. I will not go to school anymore. And he did not. That was the end of his going to school. But this boy had an elder brother, a learned professor, who took him to Calcutta to study with him. After a short time, the boy became convinced that the aim of all secular learning was mere material advancement, and he resolved to give up study and devote himself to the pursuit of spiritual knowledge. The father being dead, the family was very poor, and this boy had to make his own living. He went to a place near Calcutta and became a temple priest. In the temple was an image of the blissful mother. This boy had to conduct the worship morning and evening, and by degrees this one idea filled his mind. Is there anything behind this image? Is it true that there is a mother of bliss in the universe? Is it true that she lives and guides this universe? Or is it all a dream? Is there any reality in religion? This idea took possession of the boy, and his whole life became concentrated upon that. Day after day, he would weep and say, "Mother, is it true that thou existest? Or is it all poetry? Is the blissful mother an imagination of poets and misguided people, or is there such a reality?" We have seen that of books, of education, in our sense of the word, he had none, and so much the more natural, so much the more healthy was his mind, so much the purer his thoughts, undiluted by drinking in the thoughts of others. However, this thought, whether God can be seen, which was uppermost in his mind, gained in strength every day until he could think of nothing else. He could no more conduct the worship properly, could no more attend to the various details in all their minuteness. Often, he would forget to place the food offering before the image. Sometimes he would forget to wave the light. At other times, he would wave it for hours and forget everything else. And that one idea was in his mind every day. Is it true that thou existest, O mother? Why dost thou not speak? Art thou dead? At last, it became impossible for him to serve in the temple. He left it and entered into a little wood that was near and lived there. About this part of his life, he has told me many times that he could not tell when the sun rose or set, nor how he lived. He lost all thought of himself and forgot to eat. During this period, he was lovingly watched over by a relative who put into his mouth food which he mechanically swallowed. Days and nights thus passed with the boy. When a whole day would pass, towards the evening, when the peal of bells in the temples and the voice of singing would reach the wood, it would make the boy very sad, and he would cry, "Another day is gone in vain, mother, and thou dost not come. Another day of this short life has gone, and I have not known the truth." In the agony of his soul, sometimes he would rub his face against the ground and weep, and this one prayer burst forth, "Do thou manifest thyself in me, thou mother of the universe. See that I need thee and nothing else." Verily, he wanted to be true to his own ideal. He had heard that the mother never came until everything had been given up for her. He had heard that the mother wanted to come to everyone, but they would not have her, that people wanted all sorts of foolish little idols to pray to, that they wanted their own enjoyments and not the mother, and that the moment they really wanted her with their whole soul and nothing else, that moment she would come. So he began to break himself into that idea. He wanted to be exact, even on the plane of matter. He threw away all the little property he had and took a vow that he would never touch money, and this one idea, "I will not touch money," became a part of him. It may appear to be something occult, but even in afterlife, when he was sleeping, if I touched him with a piece of money, his hand would become bent, and his whole body would become, as it were, paralyzed. The other idea that came into his mind was that lust was the other enemy. Man is a soul, and soul is sexless, neither man nor woman. The idea of sex and the idea of money were the two things, he thought, that prevented him from seeing the mother. This whole universe is the manifestation of the mother, and she lives in every woman's body. Every woman represents the mother. How can I think of woman in mere sex relation? That was the idea. Every woman was his mother. He must bring himself to the state when he would see nothing but mother in every woman, and he carried it out in his life. We have seen in Sri Ramakrishna how he had this idea of divine motherhood in every woman, of whatever caste she might be, or whatever might be her worth. This illiterate boy, possessed of renunciation, turned the heads of your great old Pandits. Once at the Dakshineshwar temple, the Brahmana who was in charge of the worship of Vishnu broke a leg of the image. Pandits were brought together at a meeting to give their opinions, and they, after consulting old books and manuscripts, declared that the worship of this broken image could not be sanctioned according to the Shastras, and a new image would have to be consecrated. There was, consequently, a great stir. Sri Ramakrishna was called at last. He heard and asked, "Does a wife forsake her husband in case he becomes lame?" What followed? The Pandits were struck dumb. All their Shastric commentaries and erudition could not withstand the force of this simple statement. Why should Sri Ramakrishna come down to this earth, and why should he discourage mere book learning so much? That new life force which he brought with him has to be instilled into learning and education. Later on, this very man said to me, "My child, suppose there is a bag of gold in one room and a robber in the next room. Do you think that the robber can sleep? He cannot. His mind will be always thinking how to get into that room and obtain possession of that gold. Do you think, then, that a man firmly persuaded that there is a reality behind all these appearances, that there is a God, that there is one who never dies, one who is infinite bliss, a bliss compared with which these pleasures of the senses are simply playthings, can rest contented without struggling to attain it? Can he cease his efforts for a moment? No, he will become mad with longing." This divine madness seized the boy. At that time, he had no teacher, nobody to tell him anything, and everyone thought that he was out of his mind. So days, weeks, months passed in continuous struggle of the soul to arrive at truth. The boy began to see visions, to see wonderful things. The secrets of his nature were beginning to open to him. Veil after veil was, as it were, being taken off. Mother herself became the teacher and initiated the boy into the truths he sought. At this time, there came to this place a woman of beautiful appearance, learned beyond compare. Later on, this saint used to say about her that she was not learned, but was the embodiment of learning. She was learning itself in human form. She was a sannyasini, for women also give up the world, throw away their property, do not marry, and devote themselves to the worship of the Lord. She came, and when she heard of this boy in the grove, she offered to go and see him, and hers was the first help he received. At once she recognized what his trouble was, and she said to him, "My son, blessed is the man upon whom such madness comes. People may call you mad, but yours is the right kind of madness. Blessed is the man who is mad after God. Such men are very few." This woman remained near the boy for years, taught him the forms of the religions of India, initiated him in the different practices of yoga, and, as it were, guided and brought into harmony this tremendous river of spirituality. Later, there came to the same grove a sannyasin, one of the begging friars of India, a learned man, a philosopher. He was a peculiar man. He was an idealist. He did not believe that this world existed in reality, and to demonstrate that, he would never go under a roof. He would always live out of doors, in storm and sunshine alike. This man began to teach the boy the philosophy of the Vedas, and he found very soon, to his astonishment, that the pupil was in some respects wiser than the master. He spent several months there with the boy, after which he initiated him into the order of sannyasins and took his departure. When, as a temple priest, his extraordinary worship made people think him deranged in his head, his relatives took him home and married him to a little girl, thinking that that would turn his thoughts and restore the balance of his mind. But he came back and merged deeper in his madness. The husband had entirely forgotten he had a wife. In her far-off home, the girl had heard that her husband had become a religious enthusiast and that he was even considered insane by many. She resolved to learn the truth for herself. So she set out and walked to the place where her husband was. When at last she stood in her husband's presence, he at once admitted her right to his life, although in India any person, man or woman, who embraces a religious life is thereby freed from all other obligations. The young man fell at the feet of his wife and said, "As for me, the mother has shown me that she resides in every woman, and so I have learnt to look upon every woman as mother. That is the one idea I can have about you. But if you wish to drag me into the world, as I have been married to you, I am at your service." The maiden was a pure and noble soul and was able to understand her husband's aspirations and sympathize with them. She quickly told him that she had no wish to drag him down to a life of worldliness, but that all she desired was to remain near him, to serve him, and to learn of him. She became one of his most devoted disciples, always revering him as a divine being. Thus, through his wife's consent, the last barrier was removed, and he was free to lead the life he had chosen. That was the woman. The husband went on and became a monk in his own way, and from a distance the wife went on helping as much as she could. And later, when the man had become a great spiritual giant, she came. Really, she was the first disciple, and she spent the rest of her life taking care of the body of this man. He never knew whether he was living or dying or anything. Sometimes, when talking, he would get so excited that if he sat on live charcoals, he did not know it. Live charcoals, forgetting all about his body all the time. The next desire that seized upon the soul of this man was to know the truth about the various religions. Up to that time, he had not known any religion but his own. He wanted to understand what other religions were like, so he sought teachers of other religions. By teachers, you must always remember what we mean in India, not a bookworm, but a man of realization, one who knows truth at first hand and not through an intermediary. He found a Mohammedan saint and placed himself under him. He underwent the disciplines prescribed by him, and to his astonishment found that when faithfully carried out, these devotional methods led him to the same goal he had already attained. He gathered similar experience from following the true religion of Jesus the Christ. He went to all the sects he could find, and whatever he took up, he went into with his whole heart. He did exactly as he was told, and in every instance he arrived at the same result. Thus, from actual experience, he came to know that the goal of every religion is the same, that each is trying to teach the same thing, the difference being largely in method and still more in language. That is what my master found, and he then set about to learn humility, because he had found that the one idea in all religions is, "Not me, but thou," and he who says, "Not me," the Lord fills his heart. He now set himself to accomplish this. As I have told you, whenever he wanted to do anything, he never confined himself to fine theories, but would enter into the practice immediately. We see many persons talking the most wonderfully fine things about charity and about equality and the rights of other people and all that, but it is only in theory. I was so fortunate as to find one who was able to carry theory into practice. He had the most wonderful faculty of carrying everything into practice which he thought was right. Now, there was a family of pariahs living near the place. My master would go to a pariah and ask to be allowed to clean his house. The business of the pariah is to clean the streets of the cities and to keep houses clean. By birth, the Brahmin stands for holiness and the pariah for the very reverse. And this Brahmin asked to be allowed to do the menial services in the house of the pariah. The pariah, of course, could not allow that, for they all think that if they allow a Brahmin to do such menial work, it will be an awful sin and they will become extinct. The pariah would not permit it. So, in the dead of night, when all were sleeping, Ramakrishna would enter the house. He had long hair, and with his hair he would wipe the place, saying, "O my mother, make me the servant of the pariah. Make me feel that I am even lower than the pariah." For years he thus educated himself. One of the sadhanas was to root out the sex idea. Soul has no sex. It is neither male nor female. It is only in the body that sex exists, and the man who desires to reach the spirit cannot at the same time hold to sex distinctions. Having been born in a masculine body, this man wanted to bring the feminine idea into everything. He began to think that he was a woman. He dressed like a woman, spoke like a woman, gave up the occupations of men, and lived in the household among the women of a good family, until, after years of this discipline, his mind became changed, and he entirely forgot the idea of sex. Thus, the whole view of life became changed to him. We hear in the West about worshipping woman, but this is usually for her youth and beauty. This man meant by worshipping woman that to him every woman's face was that of the blissful mother, and nothing but that. I myself have seen this man standing before those women whom society would not touch, and falling at their feet, bathed in tears, saying, "Mother, in one form thou art in the street, and in another form thou art the universe. I salute thee, Mother, I salute thee." Think of the blessedness of that life, from which all carnality has vanished, which can look upon every woman with that love and reverence, when every woman's face becomes transfigured, and only the face of the Divine Mother, the blissful one, the protectress of the human race, shines upon it. Such purity is absolutely necessary if real spirituality is to be attained. This rigorous, unsullied purity came into the life of that man. All the struggles which we have in our lives were past for him. His hard-earned jewels of spirituality, for which he had given 3/4 of his life, were now ready to be given to humanity, and then began his mission. His teaching and preaching were peculiar. In our country, a teacher is a most highly venerated person. He is regarded as God himself. We have not even the same respect for our father and mother. Father and mother give us our body, but the teacher shows us the way to salvation. We are his children. We are born in the spiritual line of the teacher. All Hindus come to pay respect to an extraordinary teacher. They crowd around him. And here was such a teacher. But the teacher had no thought whether he was to be respected or not. He had not the least idea that he was a great teacher. He thought that it was mother who was doing everything, and not he. He always said, "If any good comes from my lips, it is the mother who speaks. What have I to do with it?" That was his one idea about his work, and to the day of his death, he never gave it up. This man sought no one. His principle was, first form character, first earn spirituality, and results will come of themselves. His favorite illustration was, when the lotus opens, the bees come of their own accord to seek the honey. So let the lotus of your character be full blown, and the results will follow. This is a great lesson to learn. My master taught me this lesson hundreds of times, yet I forget it. Sri Ramakrishna too practiced the Tantra, but not in the old way. Where there is the injunction of drinking wine, he would simply touch his forehead with a drop of it. The Tantrika form of worship is a very slippery ground. Sri Ramakrishna wept and prayed to the Divine Mother to send him such a one to talk with as would not have in him the slightest tinge of kama kanchana, lust and greed. For he would say, "My lips burn when I talk with the worldly minded." He also used to say that he could not even bear the touch of the worldly minded and the impure. Question: where did this habit of seeing every people from their strongest aspect come from? It must have been the training under Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. We all went by his path to some extent. Of course, it was not so difficult for us as he made it for himself. He would eat and dress like the people he wanted to understand, take their initiation, and use their language. One must learn, he said, to put oneself into another man's very soul. And this method was his own. No one ever before in India became Christian and Mohammedan and Vaishnava by turn. I know one whom the world used to call mad, and this was his answer. My friends, the whole world is a lunatic asylum. Some are mad after worldly love, some after name, some after fame, some after money, some after salvation and going to heaven. In this big lunatic asylum, I am also mad. I am mad after God. If you are mad after money, I am mad after God. You are mad, so am I. I think my madness is after all the best. Sometimes the mind is concentrated on a set of ideas. This is called meditation with vikalpa or oscillation. But when the mind becomes almost free from all activities, it melts in the inner self, which is the essence of infinite knowledge, one, and itself its own support. This is what is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, free from all activities. In Sri Ramakrishna, we have again and again noticed both these forms of Samadhi. He had not to struggle to get these states. They came to him spontaneously, then and there. It was a wonderful phenomenon. It was by seeing him that we could rightly understand these things. It is not a very difficult matter to bring under control the material powers and to flaunt a miracle. But I do not find a more marvelous miracle than the way this mad Brahmin used to handle human minds like lumps of clay, breaking, molding and remolding them at ease and filling them with new ideas by a mere touch. Sri Ramakrishna never spoke a harsh word against anyone. So beautifully tolerant was he that every sect thought that he belonged to them. He loved everyone. To him, all religions were true. He found a place for each one. He was free, but free in love, not in thunder. The mild type creates, the thundering type spreads. Ramakrishna came to teach the religion of today, constructive, not destructive. He had to go afresh to nature to ask for facts, and he got scientific religion, which never says believe, but see. I see, and you too can see. Use the same means, and you will reach the same vision. God will come to everyone. Harmony is within the reach of all. Sri Ramakrishna's teachings are the gist of Hinduism. They were not peculiar to him, nor did he claim that they were. He cared not for name or fame. He began to preach when he was about 40, but he never went out to do it. He waited for those who wanted his teachings to come to him. Sri Ramakrishna is worshipped in India as one of the great incarnations, and his birthday is celebrated there as a religious festival. The other idea of his life was intense love for others. The first part of my master's life was spent in acquiring spirituality, and the remaining years in distributing it. Men came in crowds to hear him, and he would talk 20 hours in the 24, and that not for one day, but for months and months, until at last the body broke down under the pressure of this tremendous strain. His intense love for mankind would not let him refuse to help even the humblest of the thousands who sought his aid. Gradually, there developed a vital throat disorder, and yet he could not be persuaded to refrain from these exertions. As soon as he heard that people were asking to see him, he would insist upon having them admitted and would answer all their questions. When expostulated with, he replied, "I do not care. I will give up 20,000 such bodies to help one man. It is glorious to help even one man." There was no rest for him. Once a great man asked him, "Sir, you are a great yogi. Why do you not put your mind a little on your body and cure your disease?" At first he did not answer, but when the question had been repeated, he gently said, "My friend, I thought you were a sage, but you talk like other men of the world. This mind has been given to the Lord. Do you mean to say that I should take it back and put it upon the body, which is but a mere cage of the soul?" So he went on preaching to the people, and the news spread that his body was about to pass away, and the people began to flock to him in greater crowds than ever, and my master went on teaching them without the least regard for his health. We could not prevent this. Many of the people came from long distances, and he would not rest until he had answered their questions. "While I can speak, I must teach them," he would say, and he was as good as his word. One day, he told us that he would lay down the body that day, and repeating the most sacred word of the Vedas, he entered into Samadhi and passed away. I could not believe my own ears when I heard Western people talking so much of consciousness. Consciousness? What does consciousness matter? Why, it is nothing compared with the unfathomable depths of the subconscious and the heights of the superconscious. In this I could never be misled, for had I not seen Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gather in 10 minutes from a man's subconscious mind the whole of his past and determine from that his future and his powers? Sri Ramakrishna was quite unable to take food in an indiscriminate way from the hands of any and all. It happened many a time that he would not accept food touched by a certain person or persons, and on rigorous investigation, it would turn out that these had some particular stain to hide. Sri Ramakrishna used to deprecate lukewarmness in spiritual attainments, as for instance saying that religion would come gradually and that there was no hurry for it. We have seen how Sri Ramakrishna would encourage even those whom we considered as worthless and changed the very course of their lives thereby. His very method of teaching was a unique phenomenon. He never destroyed a single man's special inclinations. He gave words of hope and encouragement even to the most degraded of persons and lifted them up. The history of the past has gone to develop the inner life of India and the activity, the outer life of the West. Hitherto, these have been divergent. The time has now come for them to unite. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was alive to the depths of his being, yet, on the outer plane, who was more active? This is the secret. Let your life be as deep as the ocean, but let it also be as wide as the sky. The artistic faculty was highly developed in our Lord, Sri Ramakrishna, and he used to say that without this faculty, none can be truly spiritual. There are many things to learn. We must struggle for new and higher things till we die. Struggle is the end of human life. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, "As long as I live, so long do I learn." That man or that society, which has nothing to learn, is already in the jaws of death. A certain young man of little understanding used always to blame the Hindu Shastras before Sri Ramakrishna. One day, he praised the Bhagavad Gita, on which Sri Ramakrishna said, "Methinks some European Pandit has praised the Gita, and so he has also followed suit." It was no new truth that Ramakrishna Paramahamsa came to preach. though his advent brought the old truths to light. In other words, he was the embodiment of all the past religious thoughts of India. His life alone made me understand what the Shastras really meant and the whole plan and scope of the old Shastras. And the most wonderful part of it was that his life's work was just near a city which was full of Western thought, a city which had run mad after these Occidental ideas, a city which had become more Europeanized than any other city in India. There he lived, without any book learning whatsoever. This great intellect never learnt even to write his own name, but the most brilliant graduates of our university found in him an intellectual giant. He was a strange man, this Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the fulfillment of the Indian sages, the sage for the time, one whose teaching is just now, in the present time, most beneficial. And mark the divine power working behind the man, the son of a poor priest, born in an out-of-the-way village, unknown and unthought of. Today, he is worshipped literally by thousands in Europe and America, and tomorrow will be worshipped by thousands more. Who knows the plans of the Lord? Let me say now that if I have told you one word of truth, it was His and His alone. And if I have told you many things which were not true, which were not correct, which were not beneficial to the human race, they were all mine, and on me is the responsibility. It requires striving through many births to reach perfection, or the ultimate stage, with regard to a single one of the devotional attitudes. But Sri Ramakrishna, the king of the realm of spiritual sentiment, perfected himself in no less than 18 different forms of devotion. He also used to say that his body would not have endured had he not held himself on to this play of spiritual sentiment. To remove all corruption in religion, the Lord has incarnated himself on earth in the present age in the person of Sri Ramakrishna. The universal teachings that he offered, if spread all over the world, will do good to humanity and the world. Not for many a century past has India produced so great, so wonderful a teacher of religious synthesis. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa came for the good of the world. Call him a man, or God, or an incarnation, just as you please. Accept him each in your own light. He who will bow before him will be converted to purest gold that very moment. From the day Sri Ramakrishna was born dates the growth of modern India and of the golden age. It is my opinion that Sri Ramakrishna was born to vivify all branches of art and culture in this country. In the Ramakrishna incarnation, there is knowledge, devotion and love, infinite knowledge, infinite love, infinite work, infinite compassion for all beings. You have not yet been able to understand him. What the whole Hindu race has thought in ages, he lived in one life. His life is the living commentary to the Vedas of all nations. People will come to know him by degrees. The future, you say, will call Ramakrishna Paramahamsa an incarnation of Kali? Yes, I think there is no doubt that she worked up the body of Ramakrishna for her own ends. He was contented simply to live that great life and to leave it to others to find the explanation. Everybody who has gone to Sri Ramakrishna has advanced in spirituality, is advancing, and will advance. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the perfected rishis of a previous kalpa cycle, take human bodies, and come on earth with the avatars. They are the associates of the Lord. God works through them and propagates His religion. Know this for a truth, that they alone are the associates of the avatara, who have renounced all self for the sake of others, who, giving up all sense enjoyments with repugnance, spend their lives for the good of the world, for the welfare of jivas. One drop from the full ocean of his spirituality, if realized, will make gods of men. Such a synthesis of universal ideas you will not find in the history of the world again. Understand from this who was born in the person of Sri Ramakrishna. When he used to instruct his sannyasin disciples, he would rise from his seat and look about to see if any householder was coming that way or not. If he found none, then, in glowing words, He would depict the glory of renunciation and austerity. As a result of the rousing power of that fiery dispassion, we have renounced the world and become averse to worldliness. When the Avatara comes, then with him are born liberated persons as helpers in his world play. Only Avataras have the power to dispel the darkness of a million souls and give them salvation in one life. This is known as grace. The way is to call on him. Calling on him, many are blessed with his vision, can see him in human form just like ours, and obtain his grace. Those who have seen Sri Ramakrishna are really blessed. Their family and birth have become purified by it. Nobody has been able to understand who came on earth as Sri Ramakrishna. Even his own nearest devotees have got no real clue to it. Only some have got a little inkling of it. All will understand it afterwards. In the highest reality of the Parabrahman, there is no distinction of sex. We notice this only in the relative plane. And the more the mind becomes introspective, the more that idea of difference vanishes. Ultimately, when the mind is wholly merged in the homogeneous and undifferentiated Brahman, such ideas as this is a man or that a woman do not remain at all. We have actually seen this in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. You will find that no one of the great teachers of the world went into these various explanations of texts. On their part, there is no attempt at text torturing, no saying this word means this and this is the philological connection between this and that word. You study all the great teachers the world has produced, and you will see that no one of them goes that way. Yet they taught. If anyone accepts Paramahamsadeva as an avatara, it is all right. If he doesn't do so, it is just the same. The truth about it is that, in point of character, Paramahamsadeva beats all previous records. And as regards teaching, he was more liberal, more original, and more progressive than all his predecessors. In other words, the older teachers were rather one-sided, while the teaching of this new incarnation or teacher is that the best points of yoga, devotion, knowledge, and work must be combined now so as to form a new society. The older ones were no doubt good, but this is the new religion of this age, the synthesis of yoga, knowledge, devotion, and work, the propagation of knowledge and devotion to all, down to the very lowest, without distinction of age or sex. The previous incarnations were all right, but they have been synthesized in the person of Ramakrishna. That Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was God incarnate, I have not the least doubt. But then you must let people find out for themselves what he used to teach. You cannot thrust these things upon them. Without studying Ramakrishna Paramahamsa first, one can never understand the real import of the Vedas, the Vedanta, of the Bhagavata, and the other Puranas. His life is a searchlight of infinite power thrown upon the whole mass of Indian religious thought. He was the living commentary to the Vedas and to their aim. He had lived in one life the whole cycle of the national religious existence in India. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is the latest and the most perfect avatara, the concentrated embodiment of knowledge, love, renunciation, Catholicity, and the desire to serve mankind. So where is anyone to compare with him? He must have been born in vain who cannot appreciate him. My supreme good fortune is that I am his servant through life after life. A single word of his is to me far weightier than the Vedas and the Vedanta. Tasya dasa dasa dasoham. Oh, I am the servant of the servants of his servants. Certain fishermen and illiterate people called Jesus Christ a god, but the literate people killed him. Buddha was honored in his lifetime by a number of merchants and cowherds, but Ramakrishna has been worshipped in his lifetime, towards the end of this 19th century, by the demons and giants of the university as God incarnate. Here is a man in whose company we have been day and night, and yet consider him to be a far greater personality than any of the earlier avataras. Our ideal is of course the abstract Brahman, but as all cannot be inspired by an abstract ideal, we must have a personal ideal. We have got that in the person of Sri Ramakrishna. In order that Vedanta may come to everyone, there must be a person who is in sympathy with the present generation. This is fulfilled in Sri Ramakrishna. So now you should place him before everyone. Whether one accepts him as a sadhu or an avatara does not matter. He said he would come once more with us. Then I think he will embrace Videha Mukti, liberation on the fall of the body. The minds of those who have truly received his grace cannot be attached to worldliness. The test of his grace is unattachment to lust or wealth. If that has not come in anyone's life, then he has not truly received his grace. We have heard the great minister of the Brahmo Samaj, the late revered Acharya Sri Keshab Chandra Sen, speaking in his charming way that Sri Ramakrishna's simple, sweet, colloquial language breathed a superhuman purity, though in his speech could be noticed some such words as we term obscene. The use of those words, on account of his uncommon childlike innocence and of their being perfectly devoid of the least breath of sensualism, instead of being something reproachable, served rather the purpose of embellishment. Know truth for yourself, and there will be many to whom you can teach it afterwards. They will all come. This was the attitude of my master. He criticized no one. For years I lived with that man, but never did I hear those lips utter one word of condemnation for any sect. He had the same sympathy for all sects. He had found the harmony between them. A man may be intellectual, or devotional, or mystic, or active. The various religions represent one or the other of these types. Yet, it is possible to combine all the four in one man, and this is what future humanity is going to do. That was his idea. He condemned no one, but saw the good in all. It was given to me to live with a man who was as ardent a dualist, as ardent an Advaitist, as ardent a Bhakta, as a Jnani. And living with this man first put it into my head to understand the Upanishads and the texts of the scriptures from an independent and better basis than by blindly following the commentators. And in my opinion and in my researches, I came to the conclusion that these texts are not at all contradictory. The life of Sri Ramakrishna was an extraordinary searchlight, under whose illumination one is able to really understand the whole scope of Hindu religion. He was the object lesson of all the theoretical knowledge given in the Shastras. He showed by his life what the rishis and avatars really wanted to teach. The books were theories. He was the realization. This man had in 51 years lived the 5,000 years of national spiritual life, and so raised himself to be an object lesson for future generations. The Vedas can only be explained and the Shastras reconciled by his theory of avastha or stages, that we must not only tolerate others, but positively embrace them, and that truth is the basis of all religions. He had a whole world of knowledge to teach. Question: did he found a sect? No. His whole life was spent in breaking down the barriers of sectarianism and dogma. He formed no sect. Quite the reverse. He advocated and strove to establish absolute freedom of thought. He was a great yogi. Others who have nothing to teach will take a word and write a 3-volume book on its origin and use. As my master used to say, what would you think of men who went into a mango orchard and busied themselves in counting leaves, the size of twigs, the number of branches, and so forth, while only one of them had the sense to begin to eat the mangoes? There is another set of teachers, the Christs of the world. These teachers of all teachers represent God Himself in the form of man. They are much higher. They can transmit spirituality with a touch, with a wish, which makes even the lowest and most degraded characters saints in 1 second. They are the teachers of all teachers, the greatest manifestations of God to man. We cannot see God except through them. We cannot help worshipping them, and they are the only beings we are bound to worship. The Guru has to bear the disciples' burden of sin, and that is the reason why diseases and other ailments appear even in the bodies of powerful acharyas. It is easier to become a Jivan Mukta, free in this very life, than to be an acharya. For the former knows the world as a dream and has no concern with it, but an acharya knows it as a dream and yet has to remain in it and work. It is not possible for everyone to be an Acharya. He is an Acharya through whom the divine power acts. The body in which one becomes an Acharya is very different from that of any other man. There is a science for keeping that body in a perfect state. His is the most delicate organism, very susceptible, capable of feeling intense joy and intense suffering. Sri Ramakrishna is a force. You should not think that his doctrine is this or that, but he is a power, living even now in his disciples and working in the world. I saw him growing in his ideas. He is still growing. Sri Ramakrishna was both a Jivanmukta and an Acharya. The highest ideal of Ishvara, which the human mind can grasp, is the Avatara. Beyond this, there is no relative knowledge. Such knowers of Brahman are rarely born in the world, and very few people can understand them. They alone are the proof of the truths of the scriptures, the towers of light in the ocean of the world. By the company of such avataras and by their grace, the darkness of the mind disappears in a trice and realization flashes immediately in the heart. Why or by what process it comes cannot be ascertained, but it does come. I have seen it happen like that. The work which the Jnani does only conduces to the well-being of the world. Whatever a man of realization says or does contributes to the welfare of all. We have observed Sri Ramakrishna. He was, as it were, dehasthopi na dehastha, in the body but not of it. About the motive of the actions of such personages, only this can be said: Lokavattu Leela Kaivalyam. Everything they do like men, simply by way of sport. Who ever could have thought that the life and teachings of a boy born of poor Brahmin parents in a wayside Bengal village would, in a few years, reach such distant lands as our ancestors never even dreamed of? I refer to Bhagavan Ramakrishna. From the very date that he was born has sprung the Satya Yuga, golden age. Henceforth, there is an end to all sorts of distinctions, and everyone down to the Chandala will be a sharer in the divine love. The distinction between man and woman, between the rich and the poor, the literate and illiterate, Brahmins and Chandalas, he lived to root out all. And he was the harbinger of peace. The separation between Hindus and Mohammedans, between Hindus and Christians, all are now things of the past. That fight about distinctions that there was belonged to another era. In this Satya Yuga, the tidal wave of Sri Ramakrishna's love has unified all. Whoever, man or woman, will worship Sri Ramakrishna, be he or she ever so low, will be then and there converted into the very highest. He was the savior of women, savior of the masses, savior of all, high and low. In the presence of my master, I found out that man could be perfect even in this body. Those lips never cursed anyone, never even criticized anyone. Those eyes were beyond the possibility of seeing evil. That mind had lost the power of thinking evil. He saw nothing but good. That tremendous purity, that tremendous renunciation is the one secret of spirituality. Neither through wealth, nor through progeny, but through renunciation alone is immortality to be reached, say the Vedas. Sell all that thou hast and give to the poor and follow me, says the Christ. So all great saints and prophets have expressed it and have carried it out in their lives. How can great spirituality come without that renunciation? Renunciation is the background of all religious thought wherever it be, and you will always find that as this idea of renunciation lessens, the more will the senses creep into the field of religion, and spirituality will decrease in the same ratio. That man was an embodiment of renunciation. In our country, it is necessary for a man who becomes a sannyasin to give up all worldly wealth and position, and this my master carried out literally. There were many who would have felt themselves blessed if he would only have accepted a present from their hands, who would gladly have given him thousands of rupees if he would have taken them. But these were the only men from whom he would turn away. He was a triumphant example, a living realization of the complete conquest of lust and of desire for money. He was beyond all ideas of either, and such men are necessary for this century. Such renunciation is necessary in these days when men have begun to think that they cannot live a month without what they call their quote-unquote necessities, and which they are increasing out of all proportion. It is necessary in a time like this that a man shall arise to demonstrate to the skeptics of the world that there yet breathes a man who does not care a straw for all the gold or all the fame that is in the universe. Such a man then was necessary, and such renunciation is what this age requires. Lay down your lives. Make yourselves servants of humanity. Be living sermons. This and not talk is renunciation. The very sight of you will fill the worldly mind, the wealth-seeking mind, with terror. Stand you up and realize God. If you can renounce all wealth and all sex, it will not be necessary for you to speak. Your lotus will have blossomed, and the Spirit will spread. Whoever approaches you will be warmed, as it were, by the fire of your spirituality. This is the message of Sri Ramakrishna to the modern world. Care not for doctrines or for dogmas, for sects or for churches. All these count for but little compared with that essence of existence which is in each one and called spirituality. The more this is developed in a man, the more powerful is he for good. He who has most of it can do most good to his fellow men. First, then, acquire that. Only those who have seen it will understand this, but such spirituality can be given to others, even though they be unconscious of the gift. Only those who have attained to this power are amongst the great teachers of mankind. They are the powers of light. Then be you this. The more of such men any country produces, the higher is that country raised. That land where no such men exist is doomed. Nothing can save it. Therefore, my Master's message to the world is, be ye all spiritual. Get ye first realization. And to the young and strong of every country, he would cry that the time is come for renunciation. Renounce for the sake of humanity. You have talked of the love of man till the thing is in danger of becoming words alone. The time is come to act. The call now is do. Leap into the breach and save the world. While I am on earth, Sri Ramakrishna is working through me. Others love me personally, but they little dream that what they love me for is Ramakrishna. Leaving him, I am only a mass of foolish, selfish emotions.
Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Shri Guruve